Some folks think that multi-billion-dollar corporations make decisions out of greed or in the interest of their shareholders. But as CNN lets us know, they're just good folks making decisions out of the goodness of their hearts. Don't look behind the curtain. So, this is the article we're looking at, and the biggest lie they're doing today is probably how the dilemma these corporations are facing is whether they should boycott Georgia due to this horrendous voting law, or whether they should stay in Georgia and fight. Whereas, in reality, it's not even mentioning how this posturing is affecting their bottom line. None of it is about how these boardrooms are like, if we take a stance here, how is this going to affect our PR? How is this going to affect our positioning with this or that politician? Who are we going to have to lobby? None of that is mentioned. It's just entirely framed in, well, these corporations, these big, billion-dollar corporations, they're clearly trying to do the right thing. But what is the rightest thing they can do? Is it to stay in the state and fight? Or is it just to pull out altogether? So I think that is the biggest lie perpetrated in this article, but it's not the only one. So let's go through it. Another one, the article says the entire motivation for the Georgia law was Trump's big lie that the election was stolen. And so heads up, folks, I'm going to have to be a little cagey with my language here, because we are entering a minefield of potential thought crime. So I have to be very careful what I say. Now, I wouldn't go on to say that I agree with Trump's big lie that the election was stolen. If anyone would say that, I think that person should be dragged down the street and shot dead in the face. See, I am allowed to say that, but I'm not allowed to say that other thing, which I'm definitely not saying. So, what I believe I can say, though, hopefully, is that the election raised many other issues about election integrity beyond, for people who did not necessarily believe Trump's claim that the election was stolen. For example, Chris Krebs, the poster boy for election integrity for the left, the guy who quit because, Trump was so bad and said it was the most secure election ever. Even that guy admits that we're not able to properly audit our elections. Doesn't that seem like something we should be able to do? Kinda does to me. I don't know, at least from a lay standpoint, it seems like we should be able to, check the receipts, so to speak. And this expert says that's one of his primary concerns, is that we're not able to properly audit it. That's one of the things the people who were concerned about election security, even the ones not explicitly in Trump's camp, were talking about, was the auditing procedures. And he agrees with them on that. So that's one thing. Another factor was that a lot of people think state legislatures should make the election laws. Like, that's what it says in the electors clause in the Constitution, in no uncertain terms. But in this cycle, a lot of the rule changes were made by the executive branches, or the judicial branches. Some of them due to emergency virus-related stuff, and some of them not due to that. Now, were those changes constitutional? Were those changes appropriate? It's kind of an open question. Now, the Supreme Court had a chance to rule on that before the election. Supreme Court had a chance to rule on that after the election, but before certification. Supreme Court had a chance to rule on that after certification, where there was no question about who the next president was going to be, just to clarify the rules going forward. It decided to not do any of those. So there's still some very open questions on the constitutional front. Those were some of the questions, among others, that people have outside of Trump's big lie that the election was stolen, that motivated these state legislators to try to shore up election integrity, to make their voters confident that the election is a secure process, that their votes are being counted in a meaningful way. Alright, next little lie they had here was they have a link about how the Georgia law makes it harder to vote. And, this new Georgia law that this whole thing is about. And in this particular article, they don't explain why. They just say, Georgia law makes it harder to vote. And there's a link there. And then you follow that link, and it's like, so what exactly does this Georgia law do? And it explains, all the ins and outs of it. And really, I doubt it's all the ins and outs of it. They explain, the CNN take of the ins and outs of it. But it's more of a compromise. Like, a lot of the 2020 election law changes are locked in place. Like expanded access to drop boxes, for example. That certainly makes it easier to vote. That's expanded access to voting. Now, on the other side, they do require voting ID in some circumstances where they did not. That, I think, can be fairly argued is a little more restrictive on voting. So the question is, what is the net effect? Does it make it easier or harder to vote overall? And the article they linked to did not even make that case, one way or the other. It said that some advocates claim that it makes it harder to vote overall, but it didn't even lay out that argument. And nowhere in this primary article that we're looking at today did it lay out that case at all. So that's another piece of misleading information. When people see that blue link, 90% of the people are not going to follow that through and look at the source. They're just going to see, oh, it makes it harder to vote. Oh, there's a source there. They got their citation. Must make it harder to vote. And the writers of this article know that. So they don't have to have anything behind that link that actually proves the point. They should have the link there. That'll get 90% of the people to believe it. Now, to the extent that these major corporations are siding with Democrats right now, I don't think that can be considered that surprising. Right? The Democrats are the party in power. Major corporations tend to seek the favor of the party that's in a position to hand out favors. The Democrats are not afraid of dealing with lobbyists. You think Nancy Pelosi is really going to favor the working man over her group of mega donors? These, corporate Democrats, it's not the Bernie Sanders wing of the party that won. It's this entrenched establishment party of the Democrats. So these corporatist Democrats are very much in line with the billion-dollar corporations and, long history of machine politics. I don't see any reason why it would help the bottom line of these corporations to be siding with the Republicans from a lobbying standpoint. They're the weaker party right now on the federal level, and maybe you could argue they're the same in terms of pay-to-play politics. I really think the fairer argument is that the Democrats are a lot more open to that. Classic machine politics. Look at the, Clinton Foundation. Look at everything. Historically, they've always been a little bit better at that pay-to-play style. Although, certainly both sides are very much open to it. Now, if the corporations are looking at their bottom line, they're also looking at the PR side of it, and a lot of just the Republican voters might get pissed off if their posturing too much on one side of the aisle. That's another factor to be considered. But in terms of which politicians they want to be in bed with, it's pretty clear where the power lies right now. And finally, it seems odd that they put so much faith in Stacey Abrams on this issue. She's like the voice of voter integrity or election integrity. They cite her like 50 times as a hero of voter integrity. Keep in mind, she still claims that she would be the governor of Georgia right now if that election were not stolen from her. Something feels a little odd there. Alright, I'll see you next time.